Hi, this is Trash Dev, I'm Tapioca. This is episode 6 of my series about developing Lakeside, a fishing adventure RPG. In the last episode, I started working on content development with the first chapter of the game. Where I left off, I did most of the map editing, but left it as a ghost town with no NPCs or gameplay. In this video, I'm going to, keep working on that, I guess. I have a number of smaller things to finish up before that though, so let's start there. I changed the font of the game from one called Rainy Hearts to another called Pixel Operator. I initially picked Rainy Hearts because it was the first font I found online that scaled to low resolutions properly, but some of the accents made it unnecessarily hard to read and it's been bothering me ever since. Pixel Operator looks mostly the same, but without the bad parts. A few UI elements needed to be adjusted to account for the slight change in font width, and actually I think the engine is just measuring the new font wrong, which I don't know how to fix. The fish editor now supports naming fish tables, so that I can tell what I'm doing more easily when I assign them to tiles in the map editor. The item select menu has been redone from scratch. The old menu could barely fit any text, so I was gonna have to abbreviate the item names and write useless descriptions to make it work. Now I have as much room as I want, but the downside is that the item selection on the left side is done with icons only, no visible item names. I might have to rework this a third time eventually. Text boxes are now a bit more stylized when the text is meant to be spoken by a character, which should make it clear who's talking during a cutscene. It could also be cool to add character portraits and maybe a differently pitched text scroll sound effect in the future. I changed the scripting API so all functions requiring points now just take a Lua table. This makes the scripts a bit more native Lua and a bit less annoying to write. The more scripts I write, the harder it'll be to make these breaking changes to the API, so it's best to get it all out of the way now before I start writing anything. Random wandering no longer affects an NPC's position that gets saved in the map file. This wasn't the case before, and it was causing NPCs to slowly drift around the map as I playtested the game. I added a lot more error checking to scripts. I'm still investigating ways to make this better, but right now scripts are very prone to typos, and I don't want the whole game to crash just because I didn't spell something right in Lua. I'd been ignoring it up until now, but there are two major problems with how the player selects which tile to fish on. The first problem is that the process for determining which tiles can be fished on is too stupid to live. At first I wasn't getting the exact shapes I wanted from a real distance calculation, so I ended up pre-computing the set of tiles to light up for each range of fishing rod. This is kinda cursed, but it's okay as long as I don't look at it. When the player starts fishing, the game looks at all pre-computed tiles, removes the ones that aren't water, and that's it. That means if you stand next to a wall with water on the other side, you can just fish through the wall. I have some upgrades in mind that'll allow the player to fish over obstructions, but this isn't the default behavior I want, and the solution is complicated. Basically, for each tile in the range, we need to check if the straight line path from the player to that tile is unobstructed. The algorithm that does this is actually the same one used to render primitive 3D graphics in games like Wolfenstein 3D. It's a bit too complicated for me to explain here, but the good news is that some guy wrote the definitive guide to understanding it back in 2004, and he even wrote all the code for me so I can just steal it. The even better news is that I already did steal it. The exact code I need is being used to create the Fog of War in an old project where I was gonna make a social deception game about working at Olive Garden. All I had to do was copy the code from there and modify it a bit to work in my engine, and there we go, I can no longer fish through walls. The second problem is with the way the cursor moves. It's only capable of moving to another tile along the same row or column as it, no diagonal. In an unobstructed place where the tiles in range are all part of one contiguous block, that's fine, but on a more complicated map like this one, the cursor is actually locked to the 4 water tiles on the left, because it can't find any of the other tiles that are in range but don't line up horizontally or vertically. I'm going to change the algorithm that the cursor uses to seek for a tile when you press a direction. The goal is to have the cursor move to the tile the player is most likely to want. The top priority is that it moves in the exact direction the player pressed. If those tiles are all invalid, it should try to move to the side as little as possible to find a valid tile. This is the order the tiles are checked, and here's the code. It actually scans beyond the visible range, but that isn't important. And having tried out the new cursor algorithm on a few weird bodies of water, I think it works perfectly. The cursor can now move around any surface, and it can even do things like cut these corners. At this point in the process, I sort of lost the plot a little. The next thing to do was to start scripting NPCs and piece the scenario together. I didn't know where to start, so I just started working on random bits and pieces. This was my first time doing real scripting with the API, and overall I think it worked out pretty well. Scripting the more complex cutscenes is a giant pain in the ass, but it's still about as simple as it could be. Something that bothers me is these one-frame gaps between text boxes. This happens because a script node takes a minimum of 1 frame to complete, so in a sequence like this one, with a text box, then a function, then another text box, that function creates a visible gap between the text boxes. I can already fix this by multiplexing the function node with the second text box so they happen at the same time. I do this in a few places in this script, but it's unnecessary complexity that I keep forgetting to do. For the unimportant town NPCs, I used the same script for all of them and selected the text based on their name. This lets me format the script like this, which brings up an important point. In this script, all the text is in one convenient place at the top, but in other scripts, the text is spread throughout. This is a code maintainability issue, and if this weren't a game I'm making myself as a hobby, it would introduce a few real practical problems. But since it's just me, I'm gonna continue on as is, and try to just format scripts with all the text in one place whenever possible. As I kept scripting, more issues kept coming up. NPCs walk on water when pathfinding because water is technically a walkable surface. Followers don't follow you through doors, and instead stay at their old coordinates in the new layer, causing this to happen. And when I fixed that, I hit a non-reproducible bug where the player got stuck inside the follower's hitbox and couldn't move. Also, you can't walk through your follower, so it's easy for them to trap you in a corner, and if I change it so you can walk through them, there's no longer any way to talk to them. I added this editor option to the title screen that takes you straight into a blank map. I realized as I was working on the opening cutscene of the game that I'd eventually have to actually solidify the opening, and once I did that, hitting New Game to test stuff wasn't going to cut it anymore. So this lets me actually work on the very start of the game without having to sit through it a million times afterwards. Alright, so I just want to show off everything that I made actually working, and I've kind of made too much at this point. If I were to walk through and show you everything I've done in this video, it would take like 10 minutes for me to walk through all of it. I've made a ton of cutscenes, ton of NPCs. I've really done a lot of scripting work, so I'm just going to show you this one slice of gameplay so you get the idea. So at this point we've been through the opening cutscene and we've gotten the fishing rod and stuff like that. And we've been told that in order to leave town we have to get the official fishing license. And to get the fishing license from the guy who works at the store, we have to bring him a koi fish. And if you're wondering where the koi fish comes from, you can talk to this guy. Oh, he moved. You can talk to this guy and he tells you, you know, hey, this guy in town's got a koi pond. And so you think, oh, okay, that's where I'm going to get the koi from. That's kind of the purpose of the NPCs who randomly walk around town, sort of fill in the world, give you info about what to do, give you gameplay tips, things like that. But this is the guy. You can see his koi pond in the back of his house, but the door is closed, and it's because he lost the key to his house, so he's locked out. But he tells you that he dropped the key in the water by the dock. So if we come down to the dock, now that he's said that, if we were to fish here earlier, we just wouldn't catch anything. But now, if we were to fish in one of these places, we get his house key, or we're fishing for his house key right now. It's scripted so that you just always win. You can always catch the house key. It's not going to put up much of a fight. And funnily enough, because the house key is considered a fish, first of all, we store it with the rest of our fish, but then also, if we go into the wildlife guide, there's a spot for the key. There it is, there's the house key. We can now bring it back to him. Give him the key, and then he opens the door for us, so now we're able to get into his backyard and get at his koi pond. At this point, you also have to go into the forest and get a certain bait to catch the koi, and you also have to get a certain lucky charm in order to make the koi properly catchable, which you buy from the store. But that's sort of the main thrust of Town 1, is accomplishing all of that, and the whole point of that is to pretty much just get you acquainted with the systems of the game, and sort of teach you the way things are going to work. Here's the scenario I wrote in the last video, and everything highlighted in green has been made. The 3 steps involving the shop owner are going to be complicated because I need to make a custom shop interface and I keep putting it off. The forest guard got dropped, so don't worry about him, and the old man tutorial is going to require a scriptable input buffer or something so that the script can show him catching a fish. I'm going to work on those things and finish up the first town in the next video. Actually, I think I've said that a few videos in a row now, but this time I really mean it. There's only a few things left to do, and I'm excited to stop looking at this stupid town and start working on something new. There's also a few design challenges I've realized that I can't really solve when I'm still working on what's essentially the tutorial, so I want to explain that and how I plan to solve it soon. Anyway, that's it for now, so thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.